Tonight on Ground Zero, we have Alan Sachs. He's an American political scientist, author, lecturer, radio commentator, philanthropist, and professor, and emeritus of political science at the University of Texas at Arlington, where he has been a faculty member since 1965. Sachs has since retired, although he can be heard occasionally on WBAP. Sachs co-authored a book titled American Government, A Core Approach, and he has also been published in several political journals and magazine articles. And let's go to him now. Alan Sachs, hi, you're on Ground Zero.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
So great to have you on. And we had you on before, and you were amazing then. We are glad to have you on now. I want to point out a comment to you, and I want to get your opinion on this. Jack Matlock, who was the last U.S. ambassador to the USSR, said this. He said, "Maybe I'm wrong, tragically wrong, but I cannot dismiss the suspicion that we are witnessing an elaborate charade, grossly magnified by prominent elements of the American media, to serve a domestic political end, facing rising inflation, the ravages of Omicron, blame for the most part unfair with withdrawal from Afghanistan, plus the failure to get the full support of his own party for the Build Back Better legislation. The Biden administration is staggering under sagging approval ratings just as it gears up for this year's congressional elections. Since clear victories on the domestic woes seem increasingly unlikely, why not fabricate one by posing as if he prevented the invasion of Ukraine by standing up to Vladimir Putin? Actually, it seems most likely that President Putin's goals are what he says they were, and as he's been saying since he made the speech in Munich in 2007. To simplify and paraphrase, I would sum them up as, treat us with at least a modicum of respect. We do not threaten you or your allies. Why do you refuse us the security you insist upon yourself?" That's, of course, Jack Matlock, the last U.S. ambassador to the USSR, and he made that statement. What are your thoughts on that?
It's interesting as I was thinking about what you were saying earlier about manipulation, but I go back to the Vietnam War, go back to Theodore Roosevelt and the Spanish-American War, the sinking of the battleship Maine, and that's when newspapers dominated everything, and it was called yellow journalism. Some people in the audience might remember that, because the belief is that newspapers, William Randolph Hearst and others, were so powerful that they could get the country into war. I don't believe that's true today, but I do believe that Joe Biden would welcome some kind of a war with the Ukraine, and he can emerge as a great peacemaker. I don't think that's going to happen. It's not as easy to bring these pieces together as it was maybe years ago. But history is more chaotic than it is a straight line. So I'll let President Biden off the hook for a while. But it is a strange feeling where you can watch a war go on a television set or by the radio or newspaper and still have a comfortable life. And that, I think, is part of what goes on today. By the way, there's many wars in the world going on right now, in Africa, in Asia, in the Middle East, and yet we don't pay attention to those. And I think it's because Russia's involved and the Ukraine, which makes this such a big story. And also nuclear weapons could be involved. But I don't know if anybody can predict this. It is a strange, strange era in which we live today. So I go back to Theodore Roosevelt. Woodrow Wilson was called the peacemaker in Europe. The United States was not directly involved until later on. Then we go there, and Woodrow Wilson becomes this great peacemaker. I think that's what Joe Biden would like, to be called the peacemaker. But the country is not ready for another war, so we're not going to get involved.
Franklin Roosevelt once said that if it happens in government, it's planned that way. And it just seems to me that, when you're a person who does a radio show and you have to plan your show around news events, and you have to kind of put on a psychic hat for a while and say, well, how is this going to end up? We have to make plans to talk. And I was talking about how are we going to follow up what was reported weeks ago with regard to the possibility of imminent war with Ukraine and Russia. And my producer, Ron, said, well, I can promise you we're not going to be at war with Russia. I said, yeah, but the intelligence, I read a U.S. intelligence briefing from the White House that said that February 16th, would be the date of the invasion. And also it was verified in London. I think it was Politico that reported this, and I was thinking, if it happens, what are we going to do? How are we going to report it? It's going to be a new thing. We're going to be doing, a war with the internet and everything, and what kind of information will be true, what will be false. And here we are now, a day before this invasion is supposed to happen, and Putin said, I think I'm going to pull troops away and we're going to do diplomacy. And yet the rhetoric from Biden this morning didn't sound too promising.
I listened to President Biden's speech today, and it was a pretty good speech for Joe Biden. He was reading it, of course, and he can't do anything but read it now. But he was reading the speech, but it was well composed. He didn't take any questions, which is Joe Biden's deal. You don't take any questions, you simply walk away while the press fires questions at him, and he just walks away. And I think it's better that he walks away because I think his handlers or whoever they are saying, oh, my gosh, don't let him answer a question. You'll wonder where the Ukraine is.
Right.
But it's a strange environment that we have today. Instant news, and yet I don't know if it's as manipulated as we think. Vietnam was manipulated, and we didn't know that at first. The Gulf of Tonkin, all of that was just made up, as I understand it now.
Yeah.
And if you read Robert McNamara's book, the former defense secretary, called The Fog of War, he actually talks about that. But he mentions it as a fog of war, that we really don't know how we get into it, but it is pretty well established that Vietnam was arranged. We didn't have to get into it, but we wanted to. I don't think we want to get into this match between Russia and the Ukraine.
We don't, but when Putin says that, hey, I'm pulling troops out, now, of course, Biden says we can't verify that, but yesterday I remember reading that there were only 100,000 troops that were amassed from the United States and Britain on the Ukrainian border. What's that?
Now it's 150,000.
150. Now they're 200,000.
Are they saying 200,000 now?
200,000 now.
Wow.
And so, we are acting as though there's going to be an invasion. I'm curious as to if the Ukrainians know and Putin knows, because once again, it's a confusing, it's a confusing report.
Confusing.
Nothing makes any sense here. It's like, okay, so they're going to attack. They're almost like they're precisely giving us the date, but can they give us the time zone? Can they give us what time it's going to happen? We increase the troop load, and the question is why? Why is it that no one can give us a direct answer? That Kamala Harris gets in a fight on NBC's Today Show because she doesn't like the line of questioning from Savannah Guthrie. Biden gets up and he, like you say, he gives a great speech. He gets through the speech. It was a very tough speech, but it didn't sound like that he wanted to reconcile anything. It sounded like that we're going to be on a war footing and that he believes that the American people are going to be able to stand behind him because they know what it means to sacrifice for democracy. Are you kidding me? How is it that we're going to make any more sacrifices? And
he walks away without answering a one question.
Right.
That's very bothersome to me.
Yeah. It's just bizarre, the world we live in. Alan SAXE with us tonight on Ground Zero. We're going to be back with more. And if you want to call in and ask some questions of Alan and maybe some of the opinions you have on what's going on here, we'd love to hear from you because it just seems to me that nothing here makes any sense.